money, so your BCBA designs a token economy with tokens shaped like money. The client starts with $1 each day and is able to earn $2 more in addition to the first dollar. If your client engages in maladaptive behavior, you remove the first dollar. Removing the first dollar is what type of intervention? Okay, so this is a very straightforward question. It's simply asking you what intervention are you using. So it's almost a definition question, okay, disguised as an application question. Meaning if you've been studying your task list study guide and becoming fluent in your terms and definitions, this question should be very straightforward. So what do we want to know? We want to know, what does it mean, or what is it called when you remove a token, okay, in response to a maladaptive behavior, right? Is it negative reinforcement? Well, no, because we're trying to decrease the behavior, right? So it's a type of punishment, meaning what are we doing? Well, we're removing something. And when you remove a stimuli to decrease a behavior, what is that called? It's negative punishment. So we know this is a type of negative punishment, but we don't have that as an answer choice, right? We have negative reinforcement, which is wrong. We have positive punishment, which is wrong. So that leaves us with response cost and naturalistic teaching. We know this isn't naturalistic teaching, okay, because it's clearly a contrived setting. So our answer is what? Response cost. So I worked through that in a way where we were eliminating answer choices, okay? But once you get good at the test and once you become fluent in terms and definitions, you won't even have to do this for this question. You're going to know the answer to this question before you even read the answer choices, okay? So it's very straightforward. So again, response cost is a part of a token economy where a client or a person can lose a token in response to a maladaptive behavior. It's a form of negative punishment. Question 2, Donna delivers her SDs in the following order. Give me a high five, high probability, touch your nose, high probability, jump up and down, high probability, spell your name, low probability. Okay, so already we should know what? This is some sort of high probability request sequence, high P, low P, okay? So what does our question want to know? Donna delivering high probability request followed by a low probability request is an example of what? Okay, remember, we're always trying to answer what the question is asking based on the information given, okay? We already know they've already given us the answer that it's a high probability request sequence, okay? So we're looking for something else. What is this an example of? Is Donna shaping a behavior? Well, no, because shaping, right, is shaping approximations of a behavior, okay? Small bits of the behavior until we reach that terminal final behavior. So it's not shaping. Is it behavior momentum? Yes, right? We're gaining behavior momentum through this high P sequence, okay? We're giving our client small requests, easy requests, okay? Building up that behavior momentum, and then bam, introducing the low probability request once we have the momentum built up, okay? So the idea behind the high P, low P, high probability request sequence is to gain momentum so we can evoke the low probability behavior, okay? Remember, even when you find the right answer or what you think is the right answer early, always read your answer choices, okay? See, maintenance training. No, we're not training maintenance or anything, right? We have a bunch of different responses going on, okay? And then functional communication training. Again, we're not training functional communication, okay? We are simply trying to evoke your client spelling their name using behavior momentum, okay? So that's a very important piece here is when you find the right answer, if it's A or B, always read C or D. Remember, the exam wants the best answer, okay? So don't be in a rush on exam day. You have plenty of time. Don't be in a rush. Make sure you have that best answer. Behavior momentum. As an RBT, you will use contingencies throughout your sessions to create opportunities to provide reinforcement to your client. What is another way to describe a contingency? All right, pretty easy question. Okay, what is a contingency? When I say contingency, what should you think? Well, you should immediately think if then, first then, okay? Engage in a behavior, receive a consequence, right? That's a contingency. You're setting up contingencies all throughout your session. If we clean our room, then we get a token. If you ask mom nicely, then she'll give you an apple, right? These if-then situations provide you opportunities to provide reinforcement and also punishment to your client, okay? They're contrived opportunities. So what's another way to describe a contingency? A, first then. Absolutely, that is a exactly what a contingency is. First you do this, then you do this. B, if then. Yep, if you do this, then you do this. Same thing, right? C, target response, then receive reinforcement. Yes, okay. Once you engage in the response, I will give you reinforcement if and only if you engage in that response. So which one of these describes a contingency? Obviously it's D, all the above. Braden is working with a client who screams to get attention. Braden's team put this behavior on extinction by withholding attention for screaming, and the behavior was extinguished. Today, Braden's client looked right at Braden and screamed as loud as they could. What is the best explanation for this behavior? Okay, so we've gone over this before, right? And I've described this as a very frustrating or very confusing occurrence when it does happen, okay? But it shouldn't be, right? Because there's a very simple explanation for why a previously extinguished behavior through extinction suddenly reappears, okay? And that's what happened here. We put Braden's behavior on extinction, and all of a sudden it came back, but it was gone, but it came back, okay? How do we explain this? What is that term? Is it A, spontaneous recovery? Yes, right? This is spontaneous recovery. Spontaneous recovery is the sudden but predictable reemergence of a previously extinguished behavior, okay? So if you're looking at extinction, the so-called chain, right, might be extinction burst, behavior gone, spontaneous recovery, okay? It might go look something like that. Once that behavior is gone and all of a sudden it reappears, this is what we consider spontaneous recovery, okay? So A is our answer, it's the best answer, but let's read our other answer choices and work on describing or explaining why the wrong answers are wrong, okay? You'll get really good if you can do that. So extinction burst, well, extinction burst has already happened. The behavior was extinguished, okay? So the extinction burst is come and gone, right? Extinction burst is that temporary increase in behavior before the behavior is extinguished, okay, during extinction. Automatic behavior, what is automatic? Automatic means it's not socially mediated. It means it only involves the person doing the behavior. This is socially mediated, right? It's Braden and the client, so it's not automatic. And then Braden was frustrated. What's wrong with this? Well, we never want to describe behavior using terms like frustrated and angry and these mentalisms, okay? We want to be objective. So the answer here is spontaneous recovery. Jimmy works Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 at his office job. Jimmy gets paid every 2 weeks. His check is directly deposited into his bank the morning of payday. Which of the following reinforcement schedules describes Jimmy getting paid? Okay, money, perhaps the ultimate reinforcer, right? Jimmy gets paid every 2 weeks. That check goes into his bank, okay? What reinforcement schedule is Jimmy on? Now, think about it. Are we looking at time or are we looking at responses? When we're dealing with basic reinforcement schedules, ask yourself, is it time or is it responses? Does it matter how often Jimmy checks his bank? No, right? Jimmy can check his bank 1,000 times a day, but that check is not going to be there, right, until enough time has passed, right? So we're looking at a time here. It's a time-based reinforcement. And how much time? Well, every 2 weeks, right? So every 2 weeks, Jimmy gets paid. Then ask yourself, does that time or that number of responses required change? No, right? Because Jimmy, no matter what, is getting paid every 2 weeks. Not sometimes 3, sometimes 1 week. It's every 2 weeks. That means what? It's fixed, okay? So we know going into our answer choices what we're looking for. And A, there you have it, fixed interval 2 weeks, what, right? It's an interval, right? It's time-based. Every 2 weeks, Jimmy gets paid, doesn't change, okay? It's not an average. It's just a fixed interval of 2 weeks. What about B? Fixed ratio 14 days. No, right? That doesn't really make sense, okay? Because that's not even a time schedule, right? 14 days is time. FR is ratio response, okay? So B is wrong. C, variable interval 2 weeks. What's wrong with C? Well, variable doesn't describe Jimmy's reinforcement. Jimmy gets paid consistently every 2 weeks, right? That never changes. It's fixed. And then finally, FR1. No, it doesn't matter When Jimmy checks his bank, okay, again, Jimmy can check it 1,000 times a day. Only after enough time has passed will Jimmy receive that reinforcement, okay? So A, fixed interval 2 weeks is the best answer. Your BCBA instructs you to start taking data on the time your client spends on the floor. You start recording at the onset of the behavior. The onset of the behavior is your client flopping to the floor. The offset of the behavior is your client getting off the floor. What type of data are you taking? Okay, so might be a little confusing, right? Don't be confused if you've never seen onset and offset. Onset just means when the behavior starts. Offset means when the behavior ends. And that's typically how you're going to write definitions and know what to measure, right? You're looking for the onset, right? Obviously, so when it starts, that's when you start your recording, and then the offset, when it stops, that's when you stop your recording, okay? So if your BCBA instructs you to start taking data on the time your client spends on the floor, okay, well, what type of data are you taking? Okay, are you taking frequency data? Is frequency data going to help you with the time your client spends on the floor? Not really, right? What is counting as your client's on the floor, right? You're not counting how many times your client falls to the floor, right? Or gets up off the floor. You're taking data on the time your client spends on the floor, right? So you're looking for that total time your client spends on the floor. So frequency is not going to help you. Partial interval. Well, if we had intervals here, right? If we had a breakdown of how much time we were spending taking data on this, okay? Interval might be right, but it looks like we're taking data continuously. Therefore, what? Partial interval is wrong. Partial interval is a discontinuous measurement. Duration. Yeah, you're taking duration data on the time your client spends on the floor, right? The onset is them flopping to the floor. You start your timer. Once your client gets off of the floor, you stop your timer, okay? And you have your duration. So you are taking duration data. Latency is just the time between what? The SD and the first response. There is no SD in the situation. You are taking duration data. Our goal is to collect data that best represents the whole picture of a client's behavior. Which of the following measurements fully captures the client's behavior? Okay, kind of a abstract question, right? What does this really mean to fully capture the client's behavior? Okay, so some of you who've been working a long time on the RBT exam might understand what they're asking. If you're ever confused, okay, you might just want to start looking at the answer choices and seeing if you get any hints, right? So if I look at the answer choices, I see examples of what? I see examples of discontinuous measurement and continuous measurement, okay? So to me, that says this question, what fully captures the client's behavior, is we're looking for something where we're going to get every instance of a behavior, right? Our data, we want the data that represents the whole picture, right? So we want all instances, as many instances of a behavior as we can get. So we can fully describe what that behavior looks like or when it occurs, etc. So which of the following measurements best does that? Well, this is pretty easy, right? Because we have 3 discontinuous measurement choices and a continuous measurement choice. Which of the 2 of discontinuous and continuous measurement, which better captures the behavior? Which captures more of the behavior? Well, obviously continuous, right? Continuous measurement captures every instance of a behavior. Discontinuous measurement only captures some instances, okay? Discontinuous measurement also overestimates or underestimates, right? Depending on if you're using partial or whole interval, okay? So discontinuous measurement isn't giving us the full or best picture, right? It's only giving you a snapshot. Continuous measurement, such as rate, gives you the entire picture, okay? So a little bit of an abstract question, right? But once you break it down, it should be very simple, okay? All right, your client is typically compliant and well-behaved. Behaviors typically occur only when the client is denied access to his Nintendo Switch or his iPad. Yesterday, you told your client he could only access the Switch after he completed 10 minutes of work. In response, your client started to cry. Based on this information, what is the best hypothesis regarding the function of the client's behavior? Okay, what is a hypothesis? Well, it's kind of like an educated guess, right? It's what you think might happen or what you think the case is, okay? Before we start doing assessments and analysis and things like that. Okay. So when they ask you for your hypothesis regarding functions, okay, they want to know, what do you think the function of the behavior is? Well, given the information where behaviors only occur when the client is denied access, and then yesterday you told him he couldn't access the switch and he started crying, what do you think the client's trying to get or get rid of with behavior? Behavior typically happens to gain something or to get rid of something. What is your client trying to do? Well, he's trying to get access to the Nintendo Switch or his iPad. So what function does that, what represents that? What function represents this behavior? Is it escape? Well, no, the client's not trying to escape anything, right? He's clearly not trying to escape the demand, right? He's trying to gain something, okay? What about attention? Well, you're giving him attention because you're talking to him, you're telling your client stuff, okay? And we know when he cries or when he engages in the behavior, he doesn't want attention. He wants his Nintendo Switch or his iPad, okay? So that means what? That means the function is most likely what? Access to tangible, okay? So C is our best answer. Automatic is obviously not the case. Why? Automatic is one person. This is socially mediated. It involves another party, okay? Best answer here is tangible. Again, why do we know that? Because when behaviors typically occur only when they're denied access, okay, and they're trying to gain access, our best hypothesis is the behavior is occurring to obtain a tangible. You're on a team with 2 other RBTs. Your client is 4 years old and receives services 5 days a week. For the past month, the team has worked on matching a receptive ID using a field of 3 cards using DTT. During DTT, you used physical prompting, but never faded the prompts. Now your client won't select the right answer unless you physically prompt them. Which of the following answer choices best describes what might be occurring? Okay, so big issue here, right? What did you fail to do? And you failed to fade the prompts. Whenever we're using prompts, we have to fade our prompts, okay? If not, this happens, okay? Where your client does what? They wait for the prompts and they won't answer or won't engage in the target response without a prompt. Prompting is an effective tool. It's a strong tool. It's a good tool, okay? But if you're going to use it, you need to use it correctly and you need to fade the prompts, okay? So our client now won't select the answer unless you physically prompt them. What does this describe? Is it a prompt hierarchy? No. What is our prompt hierarchy? Our prompt hierarchy simply represents, right, our level of prompt from most to least or least to most, right? So if we look at full physical, modeling, gestural, etc., right, we have our prompt hierarchy. So it's not prompt hierarchy. We're just simply looking at the act of your client refusing to answer unless you physically prompt them. B, prompt dependency. Yes, right, this looks pretty good, okay? They've become dependent on the prompt. They now need the prompt to engage in our target behavior because we failed to fade it, okay? And that is why we fade it, to prevent prompt dependency, okay? What about failure to generalize? No, we're not generalizing anything in this situation. What about least to most prompting? No, right? If anything, we were going most to least because we started with physical prompts as far as we know, and we never faded them out, okay? So our client, the issue here is they are now prompt dependent. And finally, ending on an easy one, I just want to give you a graph question, okay, to make sure you're still working on graphs, and also to show you that graphing questions aren't difficult because you're going to make them very easy on your exam. So if we look at our graph here, right, we have our title, rate of client screaming. So we're looking at client screaming behavior. Our y-axis features our behavior, right? Our x-axis features passage of time, okay? And what does the question want to know? Question simply wants to know what type of graph is shown below. So what type of graph is this? It's the most commonly used graph in ABA, which is sometimes a question they'll ask. So is it a bar graph, a line graph, a dot graph, or a histogram? Well, it's obviously a line graph, okay? Line graphs are the most common graphs used in ABA and what you'll be using typically as an RBT, okay? So finishing on an easy one, okay? At least I hope it was easy. Other than that, keep studying hard, keep working hard, keep your questions coming. Remember, check out our study materials, rbtexamreview.com. Like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.